Welcome on in, WIP Daily. Joe Giglio with you. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following the show. Of course, our YouTube page, 94WIP. Tucker Bagley will join me in a few minutes as we react to and give our takeaways from another Eagles win. I mean, what else is new? All this team does is win. And last night may have been their most improbable victory in 2 years. Eagles 21, Chiefs 17, in a game they were down 17-7 at half. I mean, you talk about unlikely to win that game in that moment, considering how bad they were in the first half. The offensive line allowed 5 sacks. The Chiefs had 17 points on the board. The Chiefs were 62-6 under Reid when leading by 10 or more at the half. They were 18-0 the last 18 times they scored first. 65-8 under Reid when leading going into the fourth quarter, and none of it mattered because in the second half, the Eagles' defense clamped down. The Chiefs made major mistakes with drops and turnovers and gave the football game back to the Eagles. And the Eagles' ability to just be resilient and mentally tough it's remarkable. It is their calling card more than anything else. I think they have the deepest roster in the NFL, and they have the least weak spots in the NFL. That's like a football tangible thing. But then the intangible thing is they never seem like they're defeated, even when they look defeated. Like yesterday, I thought in the first half last night, they were bullied. They were pushed around and bullied for the first time in years. I mean, I didn't think at any point last year they were bullied. And so far early this season, I didn't think they were bullied either. I thought the Chiefs out-physicaled them in the first half, and that's rare for the Eagles because they have so many good physical players, including their quarterback. They don't get out-physical, but they never back down. They never let the game get away from them. It never became a three-score game where it's like, yeah, tonight's not their night. And they found a way. Let's give some takeaways on the game and how they did this. We'll get Tucker up in a few minutes. So I thought the biggest or one of the biggest things that jumped out last night, it was a Howie Roseman win. I mean, that you think about the roster and you think about weaknesses other teams have. And the Chiefs obviously have a weakness at wide receiver that is acute. I mean, it's killing them right now. And I think their tight end, who's obviously become a bigger name in the world the last year, is actually going backwards as a player. Travis Kelce's in decline. You could see that. He doesn't move as well. That drop was, I think, a product of the idea that he knows he has to really get the corner to get away from a guy chasing him. Meanwhile, in the pass, he might just shoo that guy away. So Kelce's in decline. The receivers stink. They have a clear weakness in which Patrick Mahomes is being left out to dry. I mean, that drop by MVS was ridiculous. The Eagles have none. The Eagles don't have an acute weakness. They have some places they aren't great. I mean, they obviously, and we talked about the pass defense, but that was better last night. And you could see with Roby out there, it's a better slot situation. And Byard made some plays like this last night. They're better in the secondary than they were 6 weeks ago in the secondary personnel-wise. Defensive line is a strength. Linebacker is, I would say, maybe below average for the league, but not bottom 2 or 3 where it kills them. There's no weakness on the offense, especially with Cam Jurgens back. This roster was built by Howie and added to by Howie with 0 glaring weaknesses. And in a season where there is no special team, that might be enough to win a Super Bowl. Like the Eagles are just either excellent or solid or passable in every single area. And most teams aren't, where they have at least one spot on their team where it's like, that's going to kill them, or that's going to kill them, or that's going to kill them. The Eagles don't have that. And you saw it last night. The Chiefs' weakness killed them in the game. And the Eagles did not have one area where it's like, oh, that's going to ruin a game. And really, that's been the story of the season. They don't have that. It's why they find a way to win every single week. And the other element to this is how mentally tough and confident they are. They never seem beaten. Like the first half of that game was a moment to feel beaten because they were. I mean, they were getting pushed around. The Chiefs were running the football down their throat. They couldn't protect Jalen Hurts. Nothing was working. A.J. Brown, who has been the calling card all year, was largely invisible. But then you let them hang around. Devontae Smith, that was one of the most impressive games I've ever seen him have in the NFL. And then that catch to kind of track the ball that was underthrown and catch it at the half-yard line or 1-yard line was remarkable. The catches over the middle. I love that game out of Devontae Smith last night. Other thing to mention, another takeaway. We've done a lot. I've done a lot comparing this team to last year's team. And there's areas, obviously, where they are just as strong or stronger. And then there are areas where they're not as good or they're weaker. One area we have not brought up enough this year, I haven't brought up enough, is how much better the Eagles are special teams this year. It was a clear weakness last year. It was one area last year where they were weak, and they didn't have many. And that might have been their only area last year. And I guess run defense, so they patched that up as the season went along. That was a weaker point, but it wasn't awful. Their special teams was awful last year, one of the worst in the NFL. And, it cost them the Super Bowl. You go back 2 years ago in the NFL where the Packers had the #1 seed and had a big season, and their special teams was awful. It cost them block punt against the Niners in a playoff game. If you have a big weakness, at some point it's going to kill you. Well, the Eagles' special teams is not only not weak anymore, it's actually been pretty strong this year. I think they're getting pretty good punt work from man since he got here. Britton Covey has a chance to be a Pro Bowler after being the guy that people just thought was just like this fun story that made the roster, but come on, it's Britton Covey. Britton Covey's really changed the field position last night. I mean, Covey last night, he had 3 returns for or a little over 17 yards per return last night. In a game where field position mattered, it's 21-17, that made a big difference. And how about the play by Josh Jobe late in the fourth quarter to down the ball at the 9-yard line, force the Chiefs, and we know with their receivers it's going to be an adventure, to go 91 yards. And they couldn't do it. I mean, they eventually made mistakes, and they had drops, and they killed themselves, in terms of field position, in terms of losing a down on the intentional grounding. Like, the Chiefs aren't built to go 91 yards in crunch time right now with that receiving core against a solid defense and a good pass rush. So that made a difference. The absolutely made a difference for the Eagles having better special teams last night. That is really good. One other thing, and then we'll bring in Tucker and we'll talk about this team as we move forward here. I think Tucker's brought this up on the show, and it hit me last night just kind of thinking through the games I've seen so far this year. The Eagles' biggest challenge to win the Super Bowl is going to be before the Super Bowl. I believe the winner of the Super Bowl this year is coming out of the NFC. If you look at the top 4 right now in the NFC versus the top 4 in the AFC. So right now, and the order is kind of fluid here, but it's obviously the Eagles and the Lions and the 49ers and the Cowboys. I'll put the Cowboys as the 4th best record. I know the South's going to have a division winner. Come on. Whoever finishes second in the East, Eagles or Cowboys, they're going to beat the NFC South winner. The 4 best teams in the NFC by record are the Eagles, the Lions, the 49ers, the Cowboys. Those 4 teams, look at them compared to the 4 best teams in the AFC by record. The Baltimore Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Miami Dolphins. Those are the 4 best teams right now in the AFC. Look at the head-to-head matchups so far this year between the top 4 in the NFC and the top 4 in the AFC. I believe, doing the math earlier this morning, that the NFC teams are 4-1 in those head-to-heads, like those 4 versus those 4 so far this season. And there's more to come. We'll have some more. Dallas, I know, plays Miami later this season. Baltimore does go to San Francisco, I think, around Christmas. So we'll get a bigger sampling of this before we get to the playoffs. But it's quite clear to me right now, the top 4 in the NFC are better than the top 4 in the AFC. I think there's a real case we made. Kansas City still the class of the AFC, still the favorite in the AFC, and we just saw them last night. Baltimore is good, but they've also had some really weird fourth quarters, and they just lost Mark Andrews. I don't fully trust Baltimore. Miami, I think, trends more to being a fraud than a team that's going to actually hoist the Lombardi. They're good, but I think a tough NFC team will beat them most weeks, like the Eagles did when they played here in Philadelphia. And I think Jacksonville's a total fraud. That might end up being Houston when they finish the games this weekend. But whatever. They're right now in that spot. And we just saw San Francisco blow the doors off them in Jacksonville a couple weeks ago. So as we play this thing out and we look forward here, I think and kind of reminds me, maybe it's not quite as severe of the gap, but it reminds me, when I was young, the NFC was the class of the NFL. And watching the playoffs, you just kind of knew the NFC championship game was the Super Bowl. Whether it was the Bills or whoever it was waiting on the other side. It was the Bills a lot when I was a kid. Whoever it was on the other side. Or one year was, I think it was Steelers and Chargers. Stan Humphries was the quarterback. And it was like, come on, the winner of the NFC championship game is going to win the Super Bowl. And this year is not quite like that. We're in the salary cap era, and whoever comes out of the NFC will not be favored by double digits over almost anyone in the AFC, unless it's a wild card team. But the point is, I believe the NFC is going to win the Super Bowl. I believe the Eagles' path to winning a Lombardi is going to be actually tougher at the beginning and middle of their path. Let's say against San Francisco or Dallas in the first playoff game, or against the Lions in the NFC Championship game, than it might be against the Ravens or the Dolphins or the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And that's not to say Andy and Mahomes can't figure this out and be better in February. I just think the NFC teams are deeper, better, more well-rounded. You see the knockout punch the Niners have. I haven't seen it all year from the Chiefs. You see the knockout punch the Cowboys have, although against bad teams. I haven't seen that much from, let's say the Ravens, who have done it a little bit, but also had bad fourth quarters in games. I just think the NFC at the top is better than the AFC. And last thing, we'll bring Tucker in. That game last night was huge. I know some people have made the point they didn't really need to win that game. Well, one of the tiebreakers for the number one seed is common opponents. And the Eagles got a win last night over a team, the Chiefs, as we go back to this 4-1, top of the NFC, top of the AFC so far. The Chiefs won in Kansas City earlier this year. That's a big common opponent, matcher last night. And I guess they'll go to another tiebreaker or whatever it's going to be. But that's big, because if this thing comes down to a tiebreaker and the Eagles had lost last night, well, the Chiefs had that common opponent win over the Chiefs and the Eagles wouldn't have. So it was a huge win. And it also gives them a little bit of breathing room here the next 3 weeks, because they have the rest disadvantage this coming Sunday against the Bills. They have it next week against the 49ers. They have the week after that against Dallas, and then a long trip to what likely will be a desperate Seattle team, as they're in a tough part of the schedule and look like they're kind of in a rut now. They may be teetering on, we're going to miss the playoffs if they don't win that night about a month from now. So it's a huge win. I mean, it's a gigantic win. Perseverance. This is what they do. I mean, they just win almost every single week. We're doing a podcast similar to this. I mean, they were outgained by 90+ yards again last night, 4th time this year that's happened, and they've won. It's not rare you say that in the NFL. Tucker, what were your big takeaways from last night as the Eagles win? Again, it's like we just do the same episode every week, just a different story.
Yeah, I mean, last night I texted you after the game. I texted a few other people at WIP for, give me one sentence, give me a take from the game. And James Seltzer was basically, the Eagles just win. They just find a way to do it. I mean, they got outgained last night. They played probably their worst half of football at the beginning of the season. And for a team that is really cognizant of how important, the end of the first half, beginning of the second half can be, they were terrible, right? Like they had a shot to, they got the ball with, I think, 2.5 minutes to go, really had a chance to go down and maybe tie the game and have a chance to take the lead when they started the second half. And instead they go 3 and out. They allow Kansas City to kick a field goal to go down 10. They go 3 and out, coming right out of the half. And it felt just like they were stuck in the mud. Like they just had nothing offensively. They ran screen passes almost exclusively for like the middle 2 quarters, which was, a little weird to watch. And maybe they were just so confused by what Steve Spagnuolo did early on that they were afraid to do anything else. But they just pulled it out. I mean, they had that one big play to Swift to set up the first touchdown. They had the huge play to Devontae Smith to set up the second, and that was it. And credit to the defense and credit Sean Desai for shutting out Patrick Mahomes, although that Kansas City offense hasn't scored a second half point, I think, since October 22nd. I think it's 3 straight games they've been shut out in the second half, which is wild to say out loud. But, I mean, that's a game that I don't think the Eagles win if Jonathan Gannon's the defensive coordinator, right? Like, I don't want to bring and drag Jonathan Gannon into this, but what they did in the second half and their ability to shut them down was huge. It allowed the offense to figure things out, to get a hold of themselves. And for a team like this, and we can quibble and we can talk about all of the issues they've had this year, they're good problems to have, because you can have a game like yesterday where the offense struggled for 40 of the 60 minutes of the game, and the defense pulled it out of the end. They forced 2 turnovers in the red zone. They were able to keep, Patrick Mahomes and that offense in 3rd and long to where they couldn't convert those easy passes like they did in the Super Bowl last year. I thought the run defense in the second half really tightened up and didn't allow them to play ahead of the sticks. It's a game I think we all walk away from, and there are a lot of things you can point and say, well, they need to improve this. This can't happen again. But the fact that they're doing this and still winning, and not only beating just other NFL teams, but beating teams that we expect to see in late January and early February, it's unbelievable. I mean, they're 9-1 for the second straight season. They have the best record in the NFL for 29 straight weeks. I mean, since week 1 of last season, no team has been better than the Philadelphia Eagles. It's unbelievable.
Right now, there's no question in my mind we're in the golden era of Eagles football. This run has surpassed the Reid era, and there were some great years in there. I mean, just go back to 02, 03, 04, a lot of victories, a lot of wins, championship games. This is the greatest run of Eagles football. And ironically, last night, obviously with Reid on the other side, I thought a major play in the game won with this, just because sometimes other teams screwing up, you take advantage of it. And we saw that with the Ron Rivera games against Kansas City this year. The Cowboys always screw up at the end of games. I thought Andy Reid's decision to punt 4th and 4 from the 39-yard line was ridiculous. I mean, I couldn't believe that. Where they get 19 yards on the net because the ball went into the end zone. That is and I know you can't trust the receivers right now. Kelsey's not getting much separation, but he chose not to give the ball to Mahomes, who could have scrambled for the 4 yards rather than punt the football. That was a crazy decision. Eagles take advantage. The defense stepped up. The special teams was good. Hurts shrugged off a bad first half, and the Eagles do what they always do. They win. What a night. The Eagles are 9-1 with Buffalo coming to town on Sunday. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following WIP Daily. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much for listening.